everybody. Welcome to Culture by Numbers and another episode where data geeks meet pop culture and we dive deep into ways that marketers, data scientists, and ad tech practitioners can collaborate with brands looking to utilize tools for performance. Today, we have one of my favorite people in the media marketing industry, Alvin Glay. Alvin currently serves as the Chief Strategy Officer at Response Media, a growth marketing agency based out of Atlanta, Georgia, which focuses on helping brands build direct-to-consumer relationships through first-party data and growth behind behavior science-led CRM approaches. Their client roster includes heavyweights in CPG and pharma like Ocean Spray, Reckitt, Bausch & Lomb, and Disney. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Unity J. McGill Foundation, which he established in honor of his brother Unity, who tragically lost his life in 2019 while defending a stranger. The foundation provides educational resources to students in Liberia, and he's also a recently published author of his biography, Liberian Boy, which is available now on Amazon. We actually met years ago working together on personalization strategies and A/B experimentation and testing at Verizon Wireless. Dr. Glay holds a doctorate in business from Georgia State University, an MBA from Mercer University, and is renowned for his groundbreaking research on real-time marketing, providing businesses with actionable insights with being in the moment. So hi, Alvin. Thanks for coming to the podcast today. So glad to have you and good to connect with you after all these years.
Yeah, Sunny, thank you for having me. It's always good to connect. You brought up our good old days of Verizon working on experimentation and monitoring. This was some really good times back then. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, me too. So you recently authored an article about how an agency has been telling you lies because they claim that behavioral science underpins their strategies, but really just rely on traditional service level approaches that fail to incorporate the depths of insight. Can you tell me more about why behavioral science really matters?
Yeah, so I want to take a bold stand as it pertains to behavioral science and what I've seen across the marketing landscape. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, and I've seen a lot of agency presentation marketing in general talk about how behavioral science is the foundation of their strategy. But it's being a behavior scientist who really study the marketing literature and understanding the true impact of it. I'm yet to see that being adopted, even though it's spoken about widely. But when you really look at behavioral science, it's all about, observing human behavior and doing real rooted experimentation to drive action. And this is what I'm talking about when I say, your agency has been telling you lies, because I'm yet to see, what are some of the foundational principles and proven behavioral science framework that they're using, and how that is being used across the marketing strategy, whether if it's messaging, audience segmentations, and media sequencing. So that's what I'm talking about when I say your agency is telling you lies, and would love to dive into my perspective on that.
Can you tell us more about the research you've conducted about the literature in marketing science and behavioral science and the theory of being in the moment?
My special dissertation really focused on the fear of being in the moment. We talked about when you're in the moment and you rely less on past information, you're more likely to be open to creativity and engagement, right? And really, that theory stems from the theory of mindfulness and flow, right? If you're mindful, you have access to certain things in a limited window, you're more likely to be engaged, right? Because you won't have access to that. And when you're in the flow, you hear a lot of that with athletes. When they're in the flow, they're in the zone. That's everything else doesn't matter. It's only that moment. So my research really focused on, as marketers, how can we engage individuals when they're in the moment? How can we grab their attention? And the only way of doing that is understanding them at an intrinsic level and communicating with them with information that drives value in that moment. Because if it doesn't add value, they're less likely to engage. And that's what my research of real-time marketing focuses on. And that's an example of behavior science, right? It's a proven theory that really is done in a experimentation or rigorous design to understand what are the factors that influences people engagement.
I was really fascinated about reading some of your thoughts and ideas and theories. Can you clarify more about optimal stimulation levels, or OSL, and the necessity concerns framework of NCF?
Yeah, as an agency, we've combed through the entire marketing literature to really find a proven methodology that works in terms of, the assignment that we're giving for our client. And really, there's two theory that helps us. That is the foundation of everything we do. One is the optimal stimulations level theory, which talks about us as individual. We have certain level of stimulations of satisfaction. How far we are from that satisfaction allow us to do two things. We can look within what's familiar in our purview, or we can go out to adjacent category, right? So basically understanding motivation, barriers, and constraints. At a high level, it's all about your frustration level, right? If you're highly frustrated, you're going to seek alternatives. If you're satisfied, you're going to stay within what you're already consuming. So we like to understand that for every assignment that we have, to say, what is their frustration level with this category? How open are they to receiving new information? And we have specific protocol or questions that's been studied in the literature that we uncover for each target customer that we're engaged with, right? And we collect data through two forms. One is we design surveys that uncover those information specific questions. And B, we observe their behavior, whether if it's with the brand website or the messaging or email engagement, and we take the two to inform where they are within the spectrum. The other piece is around necessity concern, which is all about practicality. And the applications of that is mostly around in the health and pharma industry. So it's all focuses on your belief about prescription medication. If my belief is high that I need this medication, is good for my life, it helps with my everyday need, I'm less concerned about the long-term effects, the side effects, and all of that. The chances of you filling that prescription is high and staying on that medication is high, right? But if your concern is higher than your belief, then more than likely you won't fill that medication. Or if you do, your staying on that medication is low. Again, so we try to understand people where they are as it pertains to their belief system, as it pertains to prescription medication. So we use that specifically in the health and pharma. And that allows us to understand, are people intentional adherer, non-intentional adherer, excuse me, or folks who unintentional adhere. So basically the differences are, I'm taking this medication, my concern is high. If I feel a little bit better, I'm going to stop taking it. So that's intentional. Or my belief is high, but I may forget I'm trying. So we tend to uncover that information that allow us to then encourage them to continue the course to drop efficacy. Right.
Absolutely. You touched upon something that's highly, highly personal, which are individuals' attitudes towards diagnosis, prescription, treatment, and even switching treatments. And years ago, I worked on metabolic disease brand portfolio for diabetes, and we came up with these personas like Social Sally, who was the first to adapt to any kind of new treatment and then tell all her mommy play date friends about how they found a new treatment discovery for their kids. And then there was Nervous Ned, who is completely in denial that they're even sick, that they don't have the disease, that they are going to treat with vitamin supplements and other homeopathic solutions. And so you really started to touch upon some real world examples of the adaptation and application of these models about optimal stimulation and necessity concerns. So can you share a real world example with one of your pharma clients that kind of led to some effective outcomes?
Yeah, for sure. So the example that you just gave, going back to my article agency or telling a lie, is usually the data that inputs the segmentation is subjective, right? There are surveys that are done, they're without proper protocol around the quality of the data to remove exaggerated effects or biases from that. So when I'm talking about practicing sound behavioral principles using a specific framework that has specific questions and design to uncover these information and put individual segmentations. So we have a client that's over the counter, prescription medication for cold and flu. They're asked two things. A, how do we increase household penetration, right? So reach new prospective buyers, that suffer from cold and flu, and how do we make our brand the number one choice when people are sick? And for folks who are chronic, that have chronic conditions, how do we make them, because we know this medication is effective as a choice for them to increase purchase frequency? So, excuse me, so we use our approach to really understand what are the differences in behavior as it pertains to their understanding of the condition, their purchase habit frequency, whether they're occasional purchaser, only buy it when I feel sick, or do I need to keep it at the house and take it every day for my condition because it helps long-term impact. And that allows us to create segmentation in terms of these are light users, occasional purchaser, and these are chronic users, people who need it, right, for their long-term conditions. And understanding those characteristics allow us to create what we call our messaging hierarchy that's based on A, their frustration, their belief system, how they believe about medication. B, the frustration level, their motivations, barriers, and constraints as it pertains to that. And then two, sort of their triggers on what factors influence their decision making habits. Right. So these are the characteristics that allow us to put them in segmentations and then drive the communication. And we're able to increase purchase frequency by 2x, reduce churn, by 20%. Just understanding those little nuances for this brand that we work with for the last 3 years.
Absolutely. There's a whole world of practices around treatment for chronic medications. I remember I worked on a respiratory portfolio that was not just for emergency inhalers, but actually preventative, long-term medication for those who don't just grab the inhaler when suddenly there's an escalation and an incident. So differentiating and educating patients who are in different stages of the treatment and diagnosis. And as you mentioned, the belief system is so critical for the
Right.
adherence and adoption and continuation of that treatment. Alvin, you talk a lot about the need for the right data. Can you share some of your concerns, not just about data quality, but also data equality?
I mean, when you look at all those statistic and projection, it says by 2050 or 2045, the United States is going to be a diverse country. So basically, that means that we have to have the right data that represents who we're speaking to. And that means collecting the right information in a very privacy compliant manner about the who, the what, and safeguarding that information. And a lot of brands are not putting a lot of emphasis on that because when they do marketing, it's all about let's just collect first party data. And our message is usually gem pop, right? So, how do we then move beyond these template events for a diverse culture? So, some of the stuff that we've done, we see over 1 million data points that we collect every month for our clients. And we see roughly about 20 to 30% of bad data, right? And that's incorrect contact information. There is no self-identify information in terms of the who, and all those information are critical in order for you to develop the strategy that I'm talking about, understanding people at an intrinsic level to develop communication strategy. So one, it's important to make sure your data strategy at scale, right? It's their first party data strategy. And number two, is this notion of moving beyond culture and relevance, moving beyond tempo events. So it's not about Black History Month or Hispanic American Month or Asian American Month or whatever it may be, because everybody consumes media and content every single day. And these are people that are engaging with the brand. So how do you connect with them at scale, at a personal level? You take this specifically, let's look at the pharma industry. There are certain conditions that impact people of color more than others, right? But yeah, communications gen pop. There's also believe people of color have trust in medicine and the healthcare system is low. So going back to the belief system I was talking about, how do we then understand that for a brand that need to reach a diverse audience to make sure that, hey, I'm going to talk to a doctor who looks like me, the messaging resonates with me, to make sure that this is the brand that I want to engage because they understand who I am and the right understanding.
You're absolutely right. Cultural context is so important. I remember a few years ago, Serena Williams published an article about how she was giving birth and she almost died in the process, and that infant mortality with African American women was so much higher, and that the body of research that influences the medication and treatment of patients is based on the majority of the population. And so there's
Right.
a lack of data, and in fact, it's a source of data inequality if you're basing medical research and treatment. So it's understandable that there's that trust issue and skepticism about treatment methods and methods of action if in fact it's based on a different set of population than you yourself as an individual patient. So I think that's
Absolutely.
a very important topic to talk about data equality when you're building out messaging platforms to overcome, as you mentioned, that frustration level and potential distrust about the history of research in the treatment and diagnosis. But how do you propose to solve for and address these concerns?
That's a big question, right? I think first and foremost, I think brand need to put focus on how do they build a first party data strategy at scale, not just acquiring data at scale, but acquiring the right data. And that's the who, the quality of the data, meaning it's the right information. Because if you don't have the right information, then you can't connect with individuals because it's basically doesn't allow you from a communication standpoint. So that's the first thing. And as I mentioned earlier, we see about 20 to 30% of bad data. I think IBM reported recently that there's $3.1 trillion of bad data costs annually. So it's a big, big phenomenon that brands need to put a lot of emphasis on. And that's something we work with brands to help them make sure they have the right data. That we build that understand data integrity. We can make sure that it's the right contact information. We can make sure that it's not duplicate, it's contactable, there's privacy consent, that the individual actually consent to that record. We have a receipt of that information in terms of where they provided that. And all of this is done in real time. So that's one piece. And then the biggest piece, which is, as you and I both know, what really drive performance is creative. And the reason for that is because it connects with individual at an intrinsic level. So this idea of moving beyond culture and relevance, moving beyond template events, to me is action opportunity. It's not about just Black History Month, Hispanic American, Asian American, or Cinco de Mayo and all that stuff. Is how do you incorporate that in your everyday marketing? You don't just have 5% of budgets just for multicultural. Your entire budget should be multicultural marketing. So those are the two critical points that I love to be a takeaway that A, you got to focus on data acquisition at scale, not just data, but the right data that bad culture and relevance is part of your evergreen marketing, not temporary events.
Absolutely. So I look forward to seeing the evolution and innovation of inclusion of data so that it's more representative of the population, not only in messaging and creative representation, as you mentioned, but even in addressing the cultural beliefs systems that are intrinsic to human behavior as part of behavioral science. So, how can people learn more about your studies and research? Are there any articles or events where you're going to be coming up and speaking at that they can attend?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to responsemedia.com. We have a blog there where we share our perspective. Obviously, you can follow on LinkedIn. I'm on Google Scholar. If you want to read my dissertation on being in the moment, my research there, you can find on Google Scholar. December 4th, I'll be at the digital programmatics. We're talking about this very thing. We're talking about, because AI is the hottest topic right now, but for us, it's about AI is great, but we need to focus on the governance aspect, the equality of the data, and then how do we move beyond just tempo marketing as it pertains to culture and relevance. So these are some upcoming events that I look forward to hearing different perspectives there.
Absolutely. Look forward and invite our listeners to have a conversation about the role of first party data and programmatic marketing at scale with cultural relevance and moving beyond those tentpole events. Thank you so much, Alvin, for the conversation today. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing more about your research.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for always having me.